Cyberpunk 2077's Update 2.1 is a lot bigger than we thought, as the Red Stream Showcase only revealed some of the biggest highlights, but now we have gotten a new Update 2.1 overview trailer, full-blown patch notes that go in-depth on all the new highly requested features, changes, gameplay improvements, and a whole lot of vital bug fixes. But we'll also be going over a number of extra goodies and not in the patch notes as well, so let's talk about that. Alright, so let's begin with the Update 2.1 overview trailer, as this reveals a few extra details, but doesn't nearly cover all of the exciting things coming in this update, which arrives tomorrow, December 5th at around 12 p.m. Central European Time on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X/S. The overview video actually gives us a fresh new look at some of the major new features we discussed in detail the other day, including the radio port, that being the new portable radio feature, the new and highly anticipated end cart metro system, the new cabriolet version of the Porsche 911, replayable car races, all new bikes to purchase, improved bike combat, our first look at Hangouts with partners, which shows us multiple of the potential companions in a variety of these apartments, engaging in a range of activities, including some romantic sequences, dancing, and more, major boss fight improvements, and new bike tricks. But then we also got a bit of a tease with there being more to discover. With a glimpse at the new Vista Points mechanic, what seems like a gang and trauma team shootout event, and the final screen listing some of the many new features, some of which weren't showcased or specifically detailed during the video itself, including additional car chases, newly opened highway, Vista Points, global sound effects improvements, VFX and lighting improvements, and more. But as I noted, that is not even close to being everything in Update 2.1, so let's go ahead and jump into the overwhelmingly long patch notes. This is going to be a long one, so sit back, relax, and remember, I will be going over some extra stuff, some extra goodies after the patch notes themselves. Starting again with the major new features. As V's issue with their end card city pass is now resolved, they can now travel between the 19 metro stations located throughout Night City on 5 different lines via fast travel or riding the train itself while gazing out the window and watching the world go by. We also got a few extra screenshots to go along with this, all of which look quite beautiful with some of the upgrades to the RTX mode, which we'll be going over later on in this video. On top of this, V will now be able to invite their love interest to spend some time together in any of the apartments. Hangouts are a repeatable, unlimited event that become available once the romance path with a given character has concluded. So yes, you'll be able to do this over and over again. You can now listen to the radio while on foot or while riding the end cart train using the brand new radio port feature. Available while you explore, it switches seamlessly to the car radio whenever you get in a vehicle and turns off when quest-specific music starts playing. It is now also possible to adjust the volume directly in the radio window, so you no longer have to go and hop into the settings menu. They also added replayable car races that V can take part in after finishing the Beast in Me quest, so you'll now be able to look for the race flag icons on the map and win the races to get eddies and a discount for the Auto Fixer website. Additionally, they also improved the racers' AI to make them more competitive and made enhancements so that the whole experience is a lot more fun. And lastly, sightseeing binoculars in various scenic spots have been added as another way to appreciate Night City's vistas. This is the Vista mechanic that I was talking about in the overview. Now onto accessibility. This is important for a lot of people and something we actually went in depth on in our last video, but just to cover it quickly again here, they added an option to enable a bigger interface font. You can now disable the timer in the Breach Protocol minigame, larger HUD elements, removed HUD lens distortion, that being the curved effect on the HUD, removed HUD visual effects, that being the ghosting effect on the HUD, reduced HUD decorative elements to improve clarity, added a new accessibility tab, moved the difficulty and subtitle settings and some of the controls and interface options, added a weapon cycling to ARM cyberware setting, which allows you to enable or disable cycling ARM cyberware when cycling through equipped weapons. And lastly, the UI panels up, down, and left, right keys are now rebindable to adapt depending on your keyboard. Moving on to quests and open world. V can now be pursued by gangs after taking an aggressive approach toward them during certain gigs and main quests. This is going to be an interesting one. Gigs that involve stealing and delivering a vehicle can now be turned into a car chase and a combat sequence. Decorative vendors spawned inside some kiosks are now functional. Just note that the food stands are not impacted by this change, but this is something a lot of people have been asking for, so hopefully it's a good amount of the vendors inside of kiosks that are functional. as there's a number of them. It is now possible to sit at various bars in Night City and interact with the vendors. Should be interesting to see what extent this goes to, but still pretty cool. Fix an issue where some gigs wouldn't trigger after approaching the quest area. For the quest chipping in, they fix an issue where Rogue would follow V around permanently, so unfortunately no more permanent companions. For the Cyber Psycho sighting, House on a Hill, they fix an issue where Peter Green's body was still highlighted after scanning it. Every Grain of Sand, they fix an issue where the reward vehicle for completing all Badlands gigs did not spawn. For Gas Gas Gas, they fix an issue where the reward vehicle for completing all city center gigs did not spawn. For the gig Olive Branch, they fix an issue where it was not possible to talk to Sergei Kersinski because he did not spawn. For Killing in the Name, they fix an issue where it was not possible to progress past the Go to the Signal Source objective because the conversation with Johnny did not trigger. Life During Wartime, fix an issue where Panam would not get on the motorcycle when required to follow her to the gas station. For Space Odyssey, fix an issue where the quest did not activate even after updating the game to patch 2.01. And lastly, the Prophet's Song, fix an issue where the quest could appear as undiscovered on the map. Now, as for some Phantom Liberty specific fixes, they fix an issue where enemies in some suspected organized crime activities in Dogtown did not spawn, blocking progress. Fix an issue where in-game time would not pass after watching the brain dance from Lizzie Wizzy's concert. Just note it's required to use the skip time option for the fix to take effect. Fix an issue where the Arachnophobia and all the President's Men achievements were not granted despite meeting the requirements. The Relic Ruler achievement will no longer unlock after acquiring only one relic perk, but also note that this fix will not reset in already unlocked achievements. Previously exclusive iconic weapons are now obtainable in the game. Alibi, Borzea, Leica, Taigen, and Volkodov iconic weapons will now be available for purchase from the black market vendor if they were not retrieved from an airdrop. For Addicted to Chaos, they fix an issue where the quest would complete automatically without actually finishing it, and they fix an issue where the garage door would not open after entering the code. For Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos, they fix an issue where Mr. Hands would not answer when called. For From For Her to Eternity, they fix an issue where it was not possible to place the metal pin on the table in V's apartment. For Get It Together, they fix an issue where it was not possible to enter the Heavy Hearts Club. For Hi Ho Silver Lining, they fix an issue where it was not possible to talk to Mr. Hands in the Heavy Hearts Club because he wasn't interactable or did not spawn. For Lucretia My Reflection, they fix an issue where the player could get stuck in a permanent holo call with Songbird after leaving the abandoned apartment, and also fix an issue where Reed would not call after waiting 2 days. For Somewhat Damage, they fix an issue that would cause the player to get stuck in a crouching position, making it impossible to connect to the port in the core, and fix an issue where sprinting or jumping was permanently disabled after riding the elevator. And lastly, for Things Done Changed, they fix an issue where the screen could go black after calling the nurse for players who still experience this issue after patch 2.02. Now moving on to gameplay. They've improved boss fights with Yasha Ivanov, Boris Rybakov, and Adam Smasher, as Smasher will now be able to activate his Sandevistan. He's also gotten a ton of other upgrades. We covered it more in depth in our video the other day, but he's a lot more like his Edge Runner's counterparts, as you can see on screen. They also added brand new cyberware, that being the Fiend X, which is a skeleton cyberware, and the Cogito Lattice, which is a integumentary system cyberware. And you can see the stats for them both on screen. One is for 250% RAM regen rates when available RAM is below a given point, and the other gives you armor when available RAM is below a certain point. Now, they've also gone ahead and rebalanced the stats of multiple cyberware in the game, and when I say multiple, I mean a lot. Starting with Adreno Trigger, where they decrease the movement speed bonus duration. For all of the Berserks except the Militech Berserk, they added a damage reduction bonus. For Axolotl, they decreased the cooldown reduction. For Camillo RAM Manager, they decreased the cooldown. For Chrome Compressor, they increased the cyberware capacity bonus and lowered the price. For Dense Marrow, they decreased the armor and increased the melee stamina cost. For Epimorphic Skeleton, they decreased the armor. For X-Disc, they increased the Quick Hack upload speed bonus. For Leroy Ligament System, they increased the armor. For Lynx Paws, they added 20% damage reduction from falls. For Micro Generator, they decreased the electrical damage. For the Militech Apogee Sandevistan, they decreased the extended duration bonus, decreased the max duration, increased headshot damage, and increased the crit chance and crit damage. For the Militech Falcon Sandevistan, they decreased the extended duration bonus, increase the max duration, and increase the health bonus after neutralizing an enemy. For Nano Plating, they changed the attunement from Cool to Reflex for the crit chance bonus. For Peripheral Inverse, they increased the armor. For the RAM Reallocator, they increased the recovered max RAM. For the RAM upgrade, they increased the RAM recovery rate. For reinforced tendons, they decreased the armor. For self-ice, they decreased the cooldown. For shock and awe, they changed the attunement bonus to tech weapon damage. And lastly, for universal booster, health item effects will now stack. They also decreased cyberware capacity cost for memory boost, bioconductor, Koreznikov boost system, Rara Avis, reflex tuner, defensicov, cellular adapter, handle wrap, axolotl, microgenerator, peripheral inverse, Leroy ligament system, and the Camillo RAM manager. There have also been some balance changes for some of the perks in the game, starting with spontaneous obliteration, as they've now changed the minus 15% recoil to plus 12.5% crit chance for level 1. For Die Die Die, they changed the minus 15% recoil to plus 12.5% crit chance for level 1, and added a bonus where weapon handling improves as stamina decreases for level 2. For Sharpshooter, they added a stamina cost bonus on top of the existing stamina regen rate bonus for level 3. And lastly, Shoot to Chill, they changed the minus 7% stamina cost and replaced it with a plus 4% armor penetration. Now, on top of all that, they've also done some balance tweaks for some of the weapons in the game, starting with the electric batons, as the electric batons Alpha, Gamma, and Beta now have slightly differing stats. They can now hit multiple enemies at the same time, and the base damage has been reduced by 7.5%. The M2067 Defender and the M870 HB have had their recoil patterns adjusted. The DR12 Quasar has increased damage by 8%, and the headshot damage multiplier has increased from 150% to 175%. The HA4 Grit has increased damage by 10%, and the headshot damage multiplier decreased from 150% to 125%. The L69 Zuo has increased damage by 6%, the DB4 Palika has increased damage by 9%, and tech weapons that fire in full auto when fully charged, such as the Senko LX, DR12 Quasar, HA4 Grit, will now be more stable and do roughly 15% more damage when the charge mode is active. Now, beyond the specific weapon balance tweaks, they've also made it so that crafted weapons can now have up to 2 mod slots. Just note that this change won't affect weapons crafted prior to this patch, increased the rate at which mods drop from enemies, added a chance for weapon mods to appear in containers that previously offered only crafting components, increased the availability of mods in weapon vendor stock. With the PAX mod now being always available, it will now be possible to properly install tech weapon mods instead of power weapon mods on the HA4 Grit. Tier 4 and Tier 5 weapon mods can now be found in weapon vendor stock if the player's tier is high enough. Increase the max ammo limit you can carry in your inventory for all ammo types. Crafted iconic weapons will now be properly displayed when put in the stash. I got a lot of comments asking for the stash to finally work, and well, that is indeed in this patch. Cyberware capacity charge should now drop properly for players who have reached the max level. Fix an issue where some Tier 5 plus weapons in Cyberware were upgraded to Tier 5 plus again or to a lower tier. It will now be possible to activate overclock while controlling cameras. Koreznikov will now work with throwable weapons. Fix an issue where the V for Vendetta achievement would unlock despite not meeting the requirements. Just note that this will not reset the unlocked achievement. Fix an issue where the player didn't receive the Quick in the Dead achievement despite meeting the requirements. Reduce the minimum stick tilt angle required to stay in sprint when playing with a controller. Secondary stats in Cyberware changed via the Chipware Connoisseur perk will no longer have their values randomized after saving or loading. After reaching level 60 in the Netrunner skill, the overclock ability will now properly reveal the enemies within 10 meters and allow you to hack them through the cover, and adjusted the Synapse Burnout Quick Hack, decreasing the max damage bonus from 400% to 300% for tiers 3 to 5, decreased the max damage bonus from 600% to 400%, and lowered the bonus per RAM unit from 12% to 10% for the iconic variant. Now, they've also made a ton of changes to apparently make the player movement smoother and more responsive, as V can now start sprinting immediately after shooting rather than having a delay. Fix an issue where sprinting with the held input was canceled by jumping, falling, or other actions that don't cancel toggled sprinting. If V jumps while sprinting, sprint will now resume upon landing, even if V was shooting well in the air, but not in the moment of landing. It also works for aiming, scanning, and using melee weapons. Fixed several issues with the multitasker perk. Sprint couldn't be started while already sprinting. Sprint was cancelled by jumping, dodging, dashing, or running out of stamina, and weapons were rapidly going in and out of the sprinting position, held closer to the chest. So those issues should be resolved. Fixed an issue with the ninjutsu perk where the crouch sprinting couldn't be activated with the hold crouch input, and during a slide with the ninjutsu perk, pressing sprint or dodging/dashing will now make the crouch sprint. The sprinting area on controller sticks has been increased slightly to prevent accidentally stopping the sprint, fixed an issue where sprinting couldn't be toggled during the dodge/dash. They've also added the dash slide, so pressing crouch during the dodge/dash from a standing position makes V either slide for forward dashes only or crouch. Dodge/dash during the slide is now performed in the correct direction based on the camera instead of the slide path, but can no longer be backwards or sideways. Slide is cancelled instead. Slide direction can now be adjusted slightly sideways with directional inputs. Slide can now be more consistently performed during a diagonal sprint. Sliding can now be properly cancelled with backward directional input. Automatic vaulting during dash will no longer happen for backwards or sideways dashes, but regular vaulting with the jump input is still possible in any direction. Automatic climbing during dash will no longer happen if the directional input isn't held. Automatic vaulting and climbing during dash should now be more consistent. Fix an issue where shooting was blocked while falling after an air dash. Double tap, dodge, or dash can now be performed while another directional input on the keyboard is being held, resulting in a diagonal dodge or dash. Fix an issue where sprint was cancelled by the double tap, dodge/dash, and fix an issue where slides did not fully execute when playing with the dynamic control scheme on a controller. As for some other changes, after crafting an item with the active Chimera core or the Cerberus's decoded behavioral system component, the crafting specs required will disappear from the crafting panel. Players who completed all of Regina's gigs prior to Update 2.0 will have the Neofiber cyberware they received as a reward replaced with the axolotl. Stats from the ARM cyberware will now be applied correctly regardless if they're drawn or not, and fix an issue where V's HP wouldn't drop below 25% due to the Biodyne Berserks effect remaining active permanently. Just note that this is not a retroactive fix, as it won't affect cases where the issue has already occurred prior to 2.1. Now, as for vehicles and traffic, they opened up a previously closed off highway that spans Westbrook, Santo Domingo, and Haywood. It is now possible to lean when riding bikes, so you can use the left shift and left control on keyboard or the left stick on a gamepad to make the rider lean, up to lean forward or down to lean back. Leaning only changes your center of mass, so leaning back and applying the gas will do a wheelie, leaning forward and applying the brake will do an endo, and changing your center of mass changes how much traction you have at either end. So you can lean forward a little mid-corner to induce an oversteer, or lean a little back to induce an understeer. And in the air, you can lean forward or backwards to do flips, or steer to do spins. To go along with this, they added 5 new bikes to purchase from the AutoFixer website with a nice look at one of them. They also added the new car, that being the Porsche 911 Cabriolet, which they say we can visit the AutoFixer website for more details on how to unlock it. Now, on top of that, they also added an option to mark vehicles as favorite in the Call Vehicle menu. This is going to be nice now that they're adding even more vehicles to the AutoFixer. The list is getting quite long at this point, so this is going to be a really nice quality of life change. They also added the option to throw knives and axes while riding bikes, improve the melee animations when driving bikes in third-person perspective, and attacking an NPC driver will now cause their vehicle to swerve. Moving on to sound, they've overhauled sound effects and scenes in the base game's main, side, and minor quests, authoring an upmixing of scenes to the surround sound format, added missing sound effects, fixed missing post-processing for voices, improvements to gun and combat sound effects, improvements to vehicle audio, various other sound fixes, and Panam will no longer sound as if she's in a holocall when talking to her about the events from Phantom Liberty in person. Moving on to visual, there have been various lighting improvements around Night City. They've improved the visuals of the Kuroshi scanner highlights, changed the appearance of the black wall in transmission to match its appearance in Phantom Liberty, fixed an issue where there could be a cigarette permanently attached to V's hand. The flame will now be properly aligned with the exhaust pipes on the Yaiba Kusanagi CT3X. The electroshock VFX released by Microgenerator will now have VFX when playing without Phantom Liberty, and fix some instances where the animations after installing cyberware at Ripper Docks would not trigger. Now moving on to user interface, they actually added an option to mark weapons as favorite so that selling, disassembling, or dropping them is locked. This is a feature that I absolutely adore, especially in games like Borderlands. Great quality of life improvement, so I'm glad to see it added in this update. They've also changed how the resolution scaling modes are presented in graphic settings, adding a toggle to switch between DLSS Super Resolution, AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2.1, and Intel Xe Super Sampling 1.2. And depending on your selection, you can customize other options, such as enable dynamic resolution scaling. They also added a tooltip for describing how to gain XP in each skill in the skill progression panel, and attempting to attack or shoot in areas where combat is disabled will now display an action blocked pop-up on the HUD. As for some PC-specific changes, Ray Tracing Overdrive mode has now exited the preview status and includes several image quality improvements with no performance loss, as they have now introduced ReSTIR GI, which further improves the path-traced lighting quality in RT Overdrive mode, especially in darker areas with no impact on performance, minimizing the ghosting. DLSS Ray Reconstruction is now available in the RT Ultra and other RT modes with RT reflections enabled. This was highly requested, and I'm glad to see that more people will be able to get access to Ray Reconstruction, as Overdrive mode is pretty hard to run. Fix an issue where V's and NPC's skin could have a metallic-like effect when ray tracing was enabled. Fix an issue where some characters' hair didn't cast shadows when ray tracing was enabled. Added support for DualSense controllers. And if you experience any issues with game freezing on Steam when the controller is connected after the game is already launched, just make sure to change the PlayStation controller support in Steam settings to not enabled instead of enabled, or enabled in games without support. And they added support for Samsung HDR10 Plus gaming for NVIDIA GPUs. So to enable this feature, your display has to support the technology and have the game mode enabled. And the HDR10 Plus gaming toggle will be found in settings in the video tab. For some console-specific changes on Xbox, they fixed an issue where a save failed insufficient space pop-up would appear when trying to save, despite not reaching the save limit, and added a new error message that will appear when Phantom Liberty is installed on an unsupported drive. And lastly is the miscellaneous category, as they actually fixed a crash occurring when trying to reach the second sniper in Play It Safe. This is actually a bug fix I had reported on previously, with Marston stating that they'd look into it, so it has thankfully now been fixed. It will now also be possible to properly interact with the radio in V's apartment in Mega Building H10. They fixed an issue where there was still some dead zone after setting the inner dead zone on a controller to 0, and added more secrets to be discovered by players in Night City. Now, beyond the patch notes, we actually got an in-depth look at the path tracing improvements, also known as the Ray Tracing Overdrive mode, and that's thanks to NVIDIA, as they have now released both an article and comparison videos for the upgraded tech in Update 2.1, and this is what they had to say. Full ray tracing, activated via the Ray Tracing Overdrive mode, exits preview status with the release of the Ultimate Edition, boasting additional improvements. Meaning this is seen as the full official release and not just a tech preview anymore. Under the hood, technologies including shader execution reordering, also known as SER, and opacity micromaps, also known as OMM, have delivered significant performance gains during the evolution of the Ray Tracing Overdrive mode. Now we're introducing reservoir-based spatiotemporal importance resampling global illumination, also known as ReSTIR GI, with the launch of Update 2.1 and the Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition. ReSTIR GI is an advanced sampling technique for indirect lighting available in the NVIDIA RTX DI SDK, which further improves the quality of fully ray-traced lighting in Cyberpunk 2077. Before the release of Update 2.1, some scenes were darker than intended due to the loss of lighting energy during denoising. Using ReSTIR GI, local lighting is appropriately bright, and light now travels further, illuminating a scene further in the distance and increasing the brightness of previously illuminated detail. In Update 2.0, the movement of dynamic characters, the equipping of new weapons and items, or the moving of the camera could cause full ray tracing to visibly update in areas that were previously occluded. With the introduction of ReSTIR GI in Update 2.1, this occlusion noise has been greatly reduced. In conjunction with ray reconstruction enhancements in Update 2.1, ReSTIR GI significantly reduces the ghosting of moving game elements and their shadows, further improving the image quality and immersion. And some of you may actually remember from my early Update 2.0 impressions video that this was really my only criticism of the technology, which otherwise looked breathtaking. And as NVIDIA's comparisons show, these issues have been almost fully resolved with Update 2.1. So I definitely look forward to seeing this for myself in-game tomorrow, but they're not done explaining some of the improvements. With the launch of Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition and Update 2.1, ray reconstruction has been further refined. Now, the fidelity and realism of skin rendering is improved, the quality of eye reflections enhanced, making character close-ups in conversations and cinematic moments even better. Additionally, ray reconstruction will now be usable when activating ray trace reflections, either as a part of a preset or when configuring custom settings. So again, ray reconstruction no longer requires the overdrive mode. NVIDIA also noted that they have already pushed the GeForce driver update, which is required to take advantage of all the new tech mentioned. So be sure to update your drivers, especially if you plan on using these features. Of course, as with all of their patches, there are more secret changes that they told us to keep an eye out for when the update drops tomorrow. As to whether or not it will be anything super meaningful though, I have my doubts, as this update is already unbelievably large, as we've discovered here with these patch notes. And while we couldn't be here without some of the earlier patches, such as patch 1.5, I'd say this update in terms of scale is definitely a close second behind update 2.0. And I can't even fathom if we saw Bethesda Game Studios, for example, hit us with updates of this caliber for Starfield. I think they could also turn things around pretty quickly. But whether or not something like that will happen, we'll just have to wait and see. Now, even more interestingly, FSR3 was not noted on this update, which, as we discussed in a recent video, is a promised upcoming addition to the game, as not only has it been brought up by CD Projekt Red themselves, but AMD has noted that Cyberpunk 2077 will be getting FSR3 at some point, so we can expect yet another update down the road to add FSR3 to the game. But I would say not to expect an update like this ever again for Cyberpunk 2077. It'll probably just be a smaller hotfix or minor update that adds things like FSR3. And as much as I'd love huffing on that copium and wish there would be one more sizable update that includes things like New Game Plus, I'd say it's safe to say that we're not getting it this time around. And if we do, then we can be pleasantly surprised if it happens. But for now, I'd say update 2.1 is likely the ultimate edition of Cyberpunk 2077, and we'll have to look towards Cyberpunk Orion for anything else we wish they had added to this game. As obviously, this is a single-player game, and they have already done a fantastic job of turning things around over the last few years with post-launch support, so honestly, I'm just getting greedy at this point. Now, there are a few other small changes I want to discuss relating to 2077 before leaving you all today, as there have been a few other Cyberpunk drops as of late that I haven't had the chance to touch on as of yet, things I think a number of you will probably care about. The first of which is actually some returning Twitch drops and Prime benefits for Cyberpunk 2077, which I know many were quite miffed about missing. So you'll now have another chance to stake the Amstaff Iconic Crusher, which is staying as a Prime reward for the next 23 days. But CD Projekt Red is also joining the Twitch Winter Drops Fest and bringing back the Phantom Liberty NUS Infiltrator drops from December 5th, 11 a.m. UTC to December 19th, 11 a.m. UTC, which you'll be able to unlock by watching select creators while they're playing Cyberpunk 2077 on Twitch. I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not a huge fan of Twitch drops and Prime benefits myself. I think they're kind of a pain and it just turns into people idling streams anyways. But if you like collecting everything like me and want all of this gear, then it's kind of a must. On top of this though, we've also gotten a ton of enthralling interviews, lore videos, and more over the last few weeks, all of which I will link down in the description below, alongside every other source, as always. The first of which I really want to mention is the interview with Pawel Sasko by TheNeonArcade, one of my fellow Canadians, which dives into Cyberpunk's redemption arcs, deconstructing Cyberpunk as a whole, the future of CDPR, and more. And Pawel Sasko being passionate about creating games and the Cyberpunk franchise is always a good time. So if you happen to miss it, then I definitely suggest giving it a watch, as I feel like it deserves more attention than it got. There was also a recent interview with story director Tomasz Marchewka by LitsPlay, where they went super in-depth on the writing of Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty and a few other related topics. It's just another good watch if you're interested in what goes into writing games, Phantom Liberty, or Cyberpunk in general. We also got a behind the scenes with Dawid Pawel, singer and songwriter behind Let You Down and Phantom Liberty, where they discussed his passion for music and games. And lastly, we got the final 2 episodes of Night City Archives, with the second episode touching on the many conflicts, such as the Fourth Corporate War, and the third episode being on the birth of Dogtown. These are all very short 2 to 3 minute lore videos made by CD Projekt Red themselves, which makes them very digestible for just about anyone, and I do highly recommend giving them a watch, even if you already know this lore. So again, you can find the links for everything down in the description, but the very last thing I want to mention is that the vote is now open for round 3 of the Game Awards Player's Voice Award, which is the 100% fan-voted version of the Game of the Year. And Cyberpunk 2077 has actually made it to round 3, so if you think it deserves it, especially given that some of the other games will win a lot of the official judge awards, then you can find the link to vote down below. And the only reason I feel the need to bring this up in a video is because there is a bug that seems to only be affecting Cyberpunk 2077. So if it won't let you vote for 2077, what you want to do is click vote on another game, change your vote to Cyberpunk 2077, and then submit your vote. A little odd that this only seems to affect Cyberpunk, but I'm still hoping that we see them win this one because I do think they deserve it. And with this being one of my longest videos in a long while, I hope you all enjoyed it now that my throat is absolutely destroyed. And I will see you all tomorrow with my coverage of hopefully both the Cyberpunk update and the Grand Theft Auto 6 reveal trailer. Until then, if you want something else to watch and aren't tired of listening to my voice, I'd suggest checking out my video on Skyrim and Fallout 4's upcoming updates, or if you just want to support the channel, you can check out my initial coverage of Update 2.1, as that video didn't do so well. But that's it for this video. Thanks as always for watching, and until next time, this is Apoqsi, signing off.